This is a real first for me today. It's, I think, probably the first time I've spoken on this really important Sunday of the year. And, when we look back over the last year, it's been very much dominated by COVID. When you go back to last Easter, it was quite sad that, we were reliant on the internet, but thanks to Pete and to Lynn, we were able to share messages. It's great that this year we can actually be together in person. Big thanks to the worship group because it makes such a big difference leading us on this special day. But, we can't have our bacon rolls or our hot cross buns. Although I am one for keeping tradition, so I must admit I did have one before I came out today. But one of the things when I was coming to think about today was comparing how the world is reacting with COVID with Easter. And there are two words that came to me. One we've got on the screen, thanks to James for that, which is the word hope. And the other was on plan. If you go back a year, the world did have a plan around COVID, and it was to isolate everyone, to shut everyone away. And, that worked for a few months. But then come the autumn, we were back in having to go through the same again. We've got a new plan. The new elixir is the vaccine. It's going well so far, at least in this country. But even with the plans that are there, there are all the caveats, aren't there? If we can be in this stage, if these conditions are met, we'll relax this, we'll relax that. And it's fraught with, there are variants overseas, what's happening in Europe. There are huge uncertainties around those plans. When we come to think of Easter, just think about God and his plans. One of the things that Lee said to us on Friday was that God's plan was there before the world began. We spent Good Friday thinking about that passage in Isaiah 53. God has planned it all. Those plans won't change. Those plans are real. Those plans, and we're only part way through them, will happen. So when we think of God's plan, that's a God who doesn't change, and God's plans won't change. But the other word that came to mind was the word hope. And, when we look at the definition of hope, if you go to the dictionary, hope's an optimistic state of mind based on the expectation of positive outcomes with respect to events and circumstances in one's life or the world at large. Hope is really, in the Bible definition, it's looking at the glass half full rather than half empty. But it's still not a certainty at all. When Frank shared his verse with us earlier, because I live, we can, and we have life, if we believe in him. I want us to think a little bit about that word hope this morning, just picking out a few little verses across the Gospels. This day is so central. You find it in all the Gospels, written by different people, so the words and descriptions are a little bit different with different aspects. But I did find some real thoughts and real challenges about hope for us. So the first one is on missing hope, and that goes back to the reading that Gwyn gave us at the start. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. We read this, but very often we don't think about those women and why they did this, what it meant for them going forward. We can see some of their traits in this. They were loyal to Jesus. They loved him to do that. They respected him. But there was that sense of fear. They came very early in the morning. If you actually go into the words and some of the versions, it was really a deep dawn. So they were, probably walking there in the dark, dangerous in those times, but perhaps they felt it might have been more dangerous in the light where people might have seen a group going to the tomb that Jesus was in, they did respect the Sabbath because they came as early as they can, and they'd done a lot of their preparations probably before the Sabbath to have those spices ready to come to the tomb. You could say, well, was it necessary? Jesus was buried in a rich man's tomb, and almost certainly there would have been spices on his body. It was really important to do that in those days because in that heat, if a body was left even in a tomb, there would be quite a stench after quite a short time overall. But they came and did it. But the problem was they missed the hope. If you go on in that reading, in verses 5 and 6 we read, and they were afraid and bowed their faces down to the earth. And the angel said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen." But then those words, "Remember how he spake with you whilst he was yet in Galilee." They'd been with Jesus. They had missed the point. Luke is showing that he appeals to the memory of those women to really think about the words that they had heard going forward. He is risen, and they have the message. I wonder if there are times when we miss that hope. There are two ways that we can miss that hope. Perhaps we've never really had that hope overall. Perhaps you've never come to Jesus, but in this Easter time, many people sadly haven't got that hope. During COVID, one of the words that people have been talking more about, that people haven't usually talked about, is the word of death. I think even for young people that wouldn't think about that, people have been worried, what's going to happen when I die? Well, the answer is here. The answer is with Jesus. For those of us that have admitted what we've done wrong, believed in what Jesus did on the cross, and believe that he's still alive and have come to him, if that's the case, we don't need to miss that hope. That hope is there for us. But, for many of us, even if we've got that hope, we can miss that hope. For all of us, we face times in our lives when things just don't go the way that we would have liked to go. It may be that we feel under pressure or uncertainty. It could be issues around our families, issues around our finances, issues around our health. When we lose that hope, it does affect us in the way we are. When you talk about stress, there are so many signs that do come with that. We struggle to sleep. We struggle to think clearly. Our minds get distracted. It can affect our health, the way we are. We can get irritable or we can get withdrawn. But we've no need to go into that because we've got a living God, a living hope. And the fact that he is alive, he is there. When we do hit these times, and we are all going to hit these times at various times, let's latch on to that hope that we've got, that hope that God is with us through these times. So often, even as Christians, we can miss that hope of a God who's with us. Missing hope. The next type of hope I want to think about is excited hope. So Peter, we're moving into John's Gospel now. So Peter and the other disciples started to the tomb. They were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached him first. I know how Peter felt. Since I retired in the autumn, one of the things I've been able to do is to get back to my running. And, I've generally been going out and doing about 5 miles a day. Luckily, living in Julian, there's some quite nice walks or runs around there. But since I've got back into running, I've suddenly realized that, having not done as much as I should over the last few years, that I'm not going as fast as I'd like to go. I keep going throughout, but I'm getting all these runners that are passing me all the way, and you think, oh, one day I would have been there. So I know how Peter must have been feeling with John, both started off together, but John's gone that bit faster because almost certainly Peter was that bit older than John. But, they ran. They had a real eagerness to find out for themselves. I think for all of us, Easter is a really special time. It's the centre of, our whole faith and everything we believe. But I think the challenge for us is, have we still got that excitement? When we look at the Gospels, we're looking generally at a chapter in each of them. We probably know the stories virtually off by heart. Many of the songs that we have each Easter. But have we still got that excitement? The problem with us very often is it's all up there in the head, but is it there in the heart with us? It's great to be in church together, but have we got that excitement of the message? It's such a wonderful message. I'm sure that all of us here today believe in it, but have we still got that excitement? And if we have that excitement, is it only on this Easter Sunday, or does that excitement go with us through the year? It's such an amazing story. God's plan is amazing. I think quite often as we grow older, we find it harder to be excited. It's only the young people that get carried away. But this is such a wonderful story. Have we got that excited hope going forward? Have we got that excited? We then go on to the next one, which is a certain hope. And this was when Jesus appeared in that room to the disciples. Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. It's that word certain. One of the things that probably is a real problem for me at the moment is that I'm a really keen Newcastle United supporter. You really do need a huge amount of hope to be a Newcastle United supporter. I must admit, I'm not very hopeful of seeing Premiership football with them next year. But when I was living up in Newcastle, one of the years I was doing that, they got to the cup final, and my hope was to be able to have a trip to Wembley to see them in the cup final. They've got a huge fan base. I wasn't a season ticket holder, but I did go to games, so you got a little ticket or a voucher, which meant that, once the season ticket holders had been sorted out, quite a few of the people with vouchers would be able to go and see them in Wembley. So I had that hope that I might go to Wembley and see them. On Good Friday, and in those days there was actually post on Good Friday, I got a letter, and it said I had been lucky. So I had that hope before, but it wasn't until I got that letter that I knew that my hope was certain, that I was going to be able to go to Wembley to see them. And it was a great day, despite the result where they didn't go to lift the trophy. But that hope, that sort of optimism became a certainty. And when we look at this passage in John, it was really at this point that hope became a certainty. They saw his hands. They saw his side. They saw it was definitely Jesus. So they then had a really certain hope of the person that was among them. It was the first day of the week, probably the start of the Christian Sabbath, day after the Jewish Sabbath, in remembrance of Christ's resurrection. The disciples had assembled, probably together for mutual advice and comfort. They were together. They'd shut the doors, probably for fear of the Jews seeing such a gathering together. And Jesus himself came and stood in the middle of them, having miraculously got into that room. What a comfort it was to them, that with them only being there in private, that no doors can shut out Christ's presence. I'm sure that's true of us today, despite the virus being around. And he showed them his hands, his feet, with the prints of the nails in them, containing the marks which the spear would have left in his side. They were glad and they were certain, they'd seen the Lord by these signs, these tokens that were there. We can't see Jesus in the same way. We haven't had that privilege. But there's a lot there which can give us that certainty. We've got the biblical records. We've got the historical records. People have tried to disprove it. There was that really well-known book that I remember reading years ago, Who Moved the Stone, where someone went out to prove it couldn't have happened. They went through all the possibilities and discounted them. I think many of us probably feel, well, I'm not a historian. I'm not a biblical person that can really understand all the nuances around the texts and the Greek. But what we can know for ourselves is the living God working in our lives. And for many of us, that proof isn't the bits we read that come into the head. It's the way that God has worked in our lives today. And I think if we're prepared to take that step of faith, and there always has to be that step of faith, we get to the point of certainty when we see the way that God is working in our lives. We can have that certain hope. But the last hope I wanted just to think about was a shared hope. And this is where we move slightly off the Easter story into the end of Matthew's Gospel. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, and surely I will be with you always, to the very end of the age. Here he's addressing the 11 apostles. They know that he is alive. They've got a real message to send. We often call it the Great Commission, the sending out of them. It's Jesus' last command to them at this point. They were to go forth, to carry the gospel, to carry that really good news throughout the nations. But I think it implies that, they were just the start of it. When you go to the next stage, it's got to carry on, a bit like the relay races that happen. That relay, that passing on, needs to carry on through the ages. And when you bring it today, it's the duty of all of us that believe, all of us that are Christians, to really see that missionary aspect in ourselves, to use that wonderful message that we've got, to bring it and talk to others around us. That's a command for us, to spread that good news of today, that Jesus is alive. When you look at the world today, I think people are thinking a lot more than perhaps they were a year ago. What COVID has done has made a lot of people search, what is going on? What's the point of everything? How can we get through this? So I think the needs, and people are probably much more ready to think than they might have been a year or two ago. But we've got that commission. It's an individual commission, but I think it's also a commission for us as a church as we go forward. We've really been blessed over this year. We've now got our new hall there. We've also been blessed with Leah Michelle to come to us now. So we've got the springboard to go forward. We've got that commission, but what we've really got to do is to search out with God, how do you want us to do it? The needs are huge. We can't do it all, much as we would like to. We really need to seek God's face over the coming weeks as things open out. Where do you want us to put our priorities? We know the message that we've got. We know the needs around us. But God, how do you want us to do this? We know what we did before, but what we do going forward could be quite different. It has to start with seeking God's face. What do you want us to do? So do be praying for that over the coming weeks. As leaders, we're going to meet a week on Monday. Then a couple of weeks later, we'll get together as a church. We can make plans, but the key is it's God's plans that we need. The task is great, probably greater by the day. We've got a wonderful hope to share. But let's see how God wants us to share us. Let's just go back to what we've been thinking about today. Where are we on hope? Are we missing hope going forward? Perhaps because we've never had it, or perhaps because we're struggling at the moment. Jesus is alive, so let's turn to that hope, perhaps for the first time, or just because we need him in a special way at this time. Have we got that excitement over Easter going forward? Where are we with that? If we've lost that excitement, just take that time to reflect. If you do reflect, I'm sure that excitement will come back. Let's have that certainty. We are certain. All the proof is there. It's in our lives. But the command for us going forward is to share that hope with those around us. And never has there been a greater need to do that than now. So I'm going to call on Frank now, who I think is going to lead us in a song.